Welcome back to the library. Today I'll be finishing this video book report of Brave New World. Exciting! Chapter 14. Undoing all their wholesome death conditioning with this disgusting outcry, as though death were something terrible, as though anyone mattered as much as all that. What they mean by death conditioning is when the little kids come into the ward where there's old people on their deathbeds. No one is allowed to cry for the dying, and the society wants to condition people from childhood not to feel emotion around death. The society wants people to view death as trivially as throwing out the trash. This is again another aspect of taking humanity out of humans. This society doesn't value life at all in the human sense. Life to them is an efficient workday, followed by living with a bunch of people when they go to where they reside. Then they go to parties where they're expected to be promiscuous, and then rinse and repeat the next day. They use a drug called soma, which acts a lot like ecstasy, where they see things as more exciting than it really is, without understanding that human connection, love, and having your own thoughts is what would give them an actual purpose to their lives. It might give them the most disastrous ideas about the subject, might upset them into reacting in the entirely wrong, the utterly antisocial way. It, in the quote, is referring to death. This reminds me of when people weren't allowed to visit the elderly and dying during 2020. If a loved one got sick or died during 2020, people were just expected to be okay with it and the restrictions which prevented them from visiting, as if it meant nothing. People were supposed to accept that one of the most painful milestones in a person's life had to be put on the back burner because of an illness that was so politicized that it drove people to fear each other's health statuses. It became socially acceptable to be overly critical of sneezing in public, even if you cover your nose and mouth. People became terrified of allergies because they didn't know whether it was allergies or the ever-fearful COVID. It became antisocial to sneeze in public because of the fear-mongering around an illness that has a 99.97% survival rate. Fucking ridiculous. Chapter 15 doesn't have anything new that I haven't already discussed, so on to Chapter 16. Almost nobody. I'm one of the very few. It's prohibited, you see. But, as I make the laws here, I can also break them. With impunity, Mr. Marks, he added, turning to Bernard, which I'm afraid you can't do. Sounds a lot like rules for thee, but not for me, doesn't it? The truth of this quote in our society today is very troubling. There are so many rules that dictators identifying as governors have put into place that they don't follow.
You see, everyone was required to wear a mask at SoFi yesterday. LA County Health gave KN95 masks to everyone who was there. But some photos of politicians now going maskless are trending on social media. No surprise here that this would create some news. Magic Johnson posted these photos on Twitter and Instagram. They show him with Governor Newsom, LA Mayor Eric Garcetti, and San Francisco Mayor London Breed. Some of them are holding a mask. It's not clear, if they took off the mask for the photos. People do that all the time. Still, the visual did frustrate many Californians on social media.
Dictator Gavin Newsom of California went to a basketball game and took a photo without his face diaper on, which would have been fine. Except that he made a rule that California residents had to wear face diapers. He didn't follow his own rules because he thinks he's one of the very few who can break laws. People like Dictator Newsom are such assholes that set terrible examples for the country. Do as I say, not as I do is the worst way to live life, but it is a narcissist's favorite way to live life. One set of rules for me, but not for thee. This is why this was written in Brave New World, because the only people who are okay with this shit, who can sleep at night after imposing this shit on their countries or states, is because they love being totalitarians. This is how a fascist person behaves. If you want an example of fascism being played out in front of your face, Dictator Newsom of California is that. Stop goddamn confusing the definition of fascism. I see stupid idiot college students screaming fascism at someone and don't even fucking understand why they've chosen that word to yell at the person. It's not like the person they screamed it at was demanding they do something while disallowing them to have a different opinion. Usually, most of the time, it's the stupid idiot college student who is the one being fascist, because they're usually yelling at someone for having a different opinion. Fascism doesn't allow for difference in opinion. Fascism doesn't allow for freedom or choice or life, for that matter. They're well off. They're safe. They're never ill. They're not afraid of death. They're blissfully ignorant of passion and old age. They're plagued with no mothers or fathers. They've got no wives or children or lovers to feel strongly about. They're so conditioned that they practically can't help behaving as they ought to behave. I have never trusted anyone who told me they were doing something for my safety on a collective level. Usually, it means they want to impose some bad shit on me, and they think they can manipulate me into agreeing with them. If I am brainwashed into thinking they are going to keep me safe. I am not such a damn snowflake that I need someone, especially not the government, to keep me safe. I keep my own damn self safe. The 2020 protocols also gave me that creepy feeling when I couldn't understand why the government didn't seem to be trying to eradicate or mitigate the virus. Instead, they seemed to be pushing fear and the idea that their protocols would keep me safe. I also find it insane that in the book, feeling strongly about something means to them that something is wrong and bad. This part reminded me of the cult and how they disliked emotions. They verbally beat all emotions out of me, and for a while I did go to all their meetings and all their service projects, even though I hated the meetings and the service projects. The controller in the book thinks the people are well off because they're safe, and that just because they're behaving, it must mean everything's fine. This couldn't be farther from the truth. I was literally dying inside, even though it appeared on the surface that I was going to the meetings and service projects. Yes, but what sort of science? Asked Mustafa Mond sarcastically. You've had no scientific training, so you can't judge. I was a pretty good physicist in my time. Too good. Good enough to realize that all our science is just a cookery book, with an orthodox theory of cooking that nobody's allowed to question, and a list of recipes that mustn't be added to except by special permission from the head cook. Wow. This reminded me of how the left always whines about following the science and science denier. If they hear of someone not believing what they believe, what's ridiculous about this shit is that when people give literal scientific evidence, the left says, that's not science. Why they do this is because they don't actually follow real science, just like the society in the book. They just said, oh, well, we want the science to work this way, so it will. And we'll get people to believe it by shouting them down when they don't say what we want. If someone presents us with real evidence, that doesn't matter. Only the evidence that pushes our narrative is real science. Science has become a religion. That's why on their signs that they have that say science is real, I think that they're trying to convince themselves that their version of science is real because they don't actually follow real science. Whereas if he, referring to Bernard, had the smallest sense, he'd understand that his punishment is really a reward. He's being sent to an island. That's to say, he's being sent to a place where he'll meet the most interesting set of men and women to be found anywhere in the world. All the people who, for one reason or another, have got too self-consciously individual to fit into community life. All the people who aren't satisfied with orthodoxy, who've got independent ideas of their own. Everyone, in a word, who say, anyone, I almost envy you, Mr. Watson. People who don't understand freedom think it's a punishment. Maybe I crave and value freedom because I was oppressed by the cult for 7 years, but maybe freedom is a general human need that's been distorted by fear. In this society, they've been conditioned not to think for themselves, so someplace like the island where they know that no one will be there to tell them what to do triggers their fears. I think I can see how they'd get to that conclusion, maybe because they don't want to think for themselves and be independent. It's either too difficult and they don't want to put effort in, and they'd rather just be given a roadmap to life with all the pit stops marked clearly for them. Maybe carving their own path to them is not worth it. So the island in this book just refers to a place where they send people who don't want to live in the community. They want to do their own stuff because they're self-conscious enough to know that the society that claims to be civilized is actually really shitty. On to chapter 17. This is the last chapter. But people are never alone now, said Mustafa Mond. We make them hate solitude, and we arrange their lives so that it's almost impossible for them ever to have it. This sounds like an introvert's worst nightmare. I enjoy the time I spend with other people, but I only do because I know I can have my alone time afterwards, once I go back to my home. In the college dorms, I was around people all the time, and I hated it. It felt very suffocating, especially if I was having a bad day and didn't want to talk to anyone. People were constantly going into each other's rooms. It was portrayed as this comforting thing, and you were supposed to be happy about it. I think being physically alone is different from being lonely. I craved being physically alone when there was too much outside activity with other people. Then when I was in the cult, they scheduled activities every day of the week, and I was expected to go to all of them. This, on top of going to school, working, and then going to meetings, left me no time to be myself. I think that's the way totalitarians operate. They want you to be busy with anything and everything, no matter how trivial it is, because it leaves you no time to think for yourself. I was really lonely in the cult and college because emotionally I wasn't allowed to form real connections. Everyone was supposed to be family, but I didn't know anyone deeply, and the only thing that anyone had in common with each other was the cult. No one had any real personality, so it was empty. Eventually, I found one person that I was drawn to more than everyone else, but even then, the connection was weak because no one was allowed to cultivate anything real. It wasn't until I started rebelling against the cult in my mind that I was able to form a deeper connection with this person. Once I started telling myself that the cult was not what I should be putting my effort and time into, it freed up my mind to make that deeper connection with the person. I was still physically in the cult because my roommate was part of it, so she was there all the time. Mentally, I had started pulling away from the cult, making a deeper connection with the one person I'd found who had something else in common with me other than the cult. And my roommate noticed. I had found something real in the friendship with the one person, and my roommate was able to pick up on the genuineness in the connection. But she wasn't willing to mentally pull away from the cult, so she just ended up being jealous of me and that other person. In the book, the controller, Mustafa Mond, believes he's made the people hate solitude, but I don't know if that is true in the book if everyone hates it for real. It's similar to when he said that the people feel safe so they're happy. It's not true. The more the cult tried to make me hate solitude, the more I craved it. And that concludes my thoughts from chapter 14 of Brave New World through to the end. I didn't know what to expect when I borrowed the book, and I always thought that I hated reading, but I think what I have found out through doing this video book report and reading Brave New World is that I think I don't actually hate reading. I hated that I was told what to read and when to read it, because it was those summer reading lists that they give you in public school, where it was like, we recommend you read all of these before the school season starts next semester. And I never did, because I was like, I don't want to read during the summer. I want to go out and play. As an adult now, and me choosing to, read this book for my own self with no deadline or anything like that, I feel like maybe I've come to a revelation that I don't actually hate reading. So that's probably a good thing. Thanks for sticking with me throughout this whole video series. I have been putting this video book report on a playlist on my channel, so if you just want to see the whole thing, you can just click the playlist and it'll be all right there. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.